Noble alum, my name is Constance Jones, and I had the honor of serving as the CEO of Noble. I want to thank you for taking the time to watch this video and learn more about our commitment to anti-racism. Throughout Noble's history, we have worked to create school experiences that prepare students to succeed on the path of their choice. In Noble's 20 plus years as an organization, we have evolved. Noble schools likely look quite different than when you attended, with different structures, new policies and practices, and new leadership. We know that to live up to our vision and serve the students of Chicago, we must commit to becoming anti-racist. The unequal outcomes stemming from Noble structures, policies, and practices have sparked a lot of work over the years and have been a part of Noble's evolution to become an anti-racist organization. And our anti-racism work cannot end at simply pointing out and changing policies. We have heard from many of you directly about the harm caused by these policies, and we must take steps to redress that harm. This is the only way we will have an anti-racist and more equitable Noble for all students. The urgency of Noble's anti-racism work could not be more clear. We must become a more diverse, inclusive, and equitable organization for all. Thank you for the energy and attention you have given Noble to help us become better. I encourage you to lean into our anti-racist commitment at Noble. We need you to help us continue this work, help us make the right choices, and to keep us accountable. There are lots of ways you can contribute. First, by getting to know our commitment through this video. Second, watch for surveys or polls in your email or on social media and give us your feedback. Third, stay involved, either through leaning into the Alumni Association or reach out to your alumni counselor to make sure your voice is heard. I encourage you to answer the call of the late Congressman John Lewis and get in good trouble with us as we dismantle racism at Noble. Thank you.
So in 2020, if we recall, our country was hit by two pandemics all of a sudden. One is the pandemic of COVID-19 that hit us almost a year ago today, completely unexpected, well, for the average person. And none of us really knew what it would entail and what to do about it. And right when we thought that things could not get worse, a whole nother pandemic reared its ugly head. And it wasn't something that completely caught everyone by surprise because it's been here all along. And though we were just all sitting around in our homes, kind of trapped, finally, a moment in time in history came where we could not ignore it. And so in June of 2020, right after the murder of George Floyd, our CEO, Constance Jones, made a declaration that Black Lives Matter, not only in our world and in our country, but right here in the four walls of Noble. She made it very clear that Black lives matter at Noble. And in addition to that, she gave us a charge, a higher bar of being, and that bar was anti-racism. And she stated that Noble has to become an anti-racist organization if we truly want to serve the children of Chicago how they deserve. And so in August, our equity team put out a call to all of our stakeholders across Noble, and we asked you to join us in answering this charge. We believe that it wasn't only timely or moral and just, but we also believe that it is exactly what the families of Chicago deserve. And so we begun our search. We know that the nation's public school system was never designed for the kinds of children that we serve, the beautiful children that we serve. We were never supposed to actually be successful in what we are doing. Some say the education system is broken. I'd argue it's not broken at all. It's operating very well. It is doing exactly what it was designed to do. So here we are at Noble, faced with another challenge, and that is redesigning and repurposing our schools to actually be anti-racist and create equitable experiences and outcomes for all of our staff and students. This is what Representative John Lewis would call getting in good trouble.
So let's begin with the purpose of today, the rollout of Noble's anti-racism commitment. You'll see this is titled Phase 1 because this is the first step of our journey, not the final one. So as we progress as an anti-racist organization, and you'll hear me bounce back and forth between anti-racist and anti-racist, it's just my typical language. But as we progress as an anti-racist organization, we continue to strategize in an anti-racist manner. This was true of our process in creating Noble's second DEI steering committee, whereas avoiding nomination, the committee application was open to every Noble staff member. The application launched in August and generated a wealth of quality applicants. Working with a selection committee that I owe a ton of gratitude to, Dr. Janine Franklin, Dr. Ida Acosta, and I set out on this journey, ultimately selecting 20 incredibly passionate and committed individuals representing 9 campuses, both high and low equity index, NST, instructional team members, campus admin, and for the first time as standard on a steering committee, we have Noble parents. In order to do this important work, we couldn't simply rely nor adequately function on anecdotes and our own opinions, nor should anyone. So we put lots of learning into place. There were hours of prep work and readings to really prepare us to handle this task. Before we go any further, I'd be remiss to not pause here and extend a huge amount of gratitude to the folks that make up Noble's DEI steering committee. This is such an incredibly talented group of folks, and I've been honored to work with them, and I'm so proud of their work. The DEISC will tackle lots of challenges this year, but our first project is potentially the most important and most radical for Noble: to create Noble's anti-racism commitment statement, a statement that communicated to Noble and the broader community our stance, clarified how we should go about our anti-racist work, and served as ambitious in our aspirations as an anti-racist organization. We were charged with creating a statement that pushes Noble to be a more just organization, honors the work, voices, and perspectives and experiences of all the people we serve, and protects the integrity of anti-racist work. So we're going to take a moment to reflect on Roz Brewer, HBCU alum and COO of Starbucks, and her quote as presented. The best way to change an organization is to first change the hearts and minds of its people. What I'd like from everyone present, yes, all 357 of you, is to think about this quote, and then over the next 120 seconds or so to start, share with this community what you think this quote means and how you think it's related to our anti-racist work. I'll go silent awkwardly for a few moments to allow folks some think time and some chat box time. Looking forward to reading your answers. I love it, owning the work. Where change begins is at the individual level. An organization is its people. I'm seeing all of the amazing answers you're putting forth. So as you continue to fill the chat box with this amazing perspective, and as we get closer to revealing the anti-racism commitment to each of you, it's important that we ground everyone in a shared understanding of the language you'll see. We'll begin with what we feel is the most appropriate spellings of anti-racist and anti-racism. Because if you look at any number of articles about these topics, you'll find any number of spellings. We, Noble, have decided to follow the nomenclature you see here: anti-racism with a hyphen and anti-racist without one. Though he is not the only person doing this important work, and I think it's important to acknowledge that, Dr. Kendi is considered to largely be the nation's expert on these topics, and this is his preferred spelling, and we will default to the experts. Even if when you spell it out, you may see a squiggly line underneath that says you're incorrect. The expert says you're right. Next, you'll see the term anti-Black within the statement. When we say anti-Black, we mean systemically marginalizing Black people, their value, culture, and issues. Anti-Blackness has a history of being overt in its ways and methods. Our country has a history of intentionally and strategically casting its Black community members to the bottom and to its furthest margins, and we must acknowledge that fact. We know that Noble's predominant community consists of both Black and Brown students and families. By overtly naming anti-Blackness, we are not in any way minimizing or diminishing Brown people, values, culture, or issues. We must be inclusive of all of our people and also tell the truth of the specific treatment of Blackness within this nation and thus the Noble community. Moving along, you'll see a collective phrase that includes assimilationist, patriarchal, white supremacist, and anti-Black. We use this collection of oppression to name the roots and perpetuated fruits born of racism specifically. To be certain, the statement you will soon view is an anti-racism commitment. And we were intentional on staying laser focused to that end. Other forms of oppression such as ageism, ableism, classism absolutely exist. And Noble remains dedicated to combating those forms through our commitment to and stated core value of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And we must be clear that anti-racism should not be conflated with simply equity or diversity or inclusion. They are not one and the same. And we must be clear that anti-racism is a bit of a higher bar and focused on the outcomes of people based on race. These words are strong, and some will be uncomfortable. And yet, our stance against racism must be strong and unapologetic. We are committed to naming the things that are true, especially when they make us uncomfortable, because we see this as an act of reconciliation, healing, and hope. So I'm going to spend a bit of time on this slide. Lastly, we reference the redistribution of power necessary to becoming an anti-racist organization. We must be intentionally inclusive across lines of difference and powers from the onset and at critical points of decision-making. Power in our society is unequally distributed along various lines of maleness or whiteness or straightness or wealth, etc. So we must be then intentional in our choices that redistributes the power to shape and inform decisions. In this, we must decenter whiteness. Now, this does not mean that white people should go silent. Quite far from it, actually. The fact is, in any and every community, each individual should always be ready, willing, and able to absolutely contribute to a space to the best of our ability. And we should also recognize that quality allyship is at the heart of any and every necessary change. This does, however, mean that we cannot allow white voices to speak on behalf of people of color, their voices, and their experiences. It means we should no longer see whiteness as the normative nor the bar to which we aspire to be like or become. Nor should whiteness serve as the hero in the story of people of color. As a leader, this does not mean that every decision you make is a democratic one, and our people should not expect that of our leaders. We see leadership as service. We see leadership as responsibility. In fact, good leaders toggle between traditional and equity leadership models all the time. As an organization, as a chief, PAL, director, dean, teacher, para, office manager, and associate, your goal when it comes to power and decision-making is to listen to the margins and live in the and. There are times when I need to be efficient, and there are times that I need to be intentional by design. Equity is in the and. This is messy work. The gauge is to check your natural inclinations and to make sure that you're not leaning on traditional leadership more than equity leadership models. We all have power. We all control a space. How do you hoard or distribute power? How do you censor or decensor whiteness?
Antiracism at Noble, our commitment. Antiracism at Noble is the continual process of dismantling the systems or policies at every level of our organization that perpetuate and support racism through assimilationist, patriarchal, white supremacist, and anti-Black culture.
Anti-racism means a redistribution of power, where the voices, experiences, and brilliance of all of our people, especially Black and Brown students, alumni, staff, and families, inform and shape our decisions.
This means centering the voices and experiences of our students, families, and communities.
In creating culturally relevant schooling that affirms the lived experience and traditions of all who make up our community.
Noble is committed to working with our community, accepting our past, and creating a new path forward.
Noble acknowledges that its past policies and practices have promoted assimilationist, patriarchal, white supremacist, and anti-Black culture.
Noble is committed to using this moment in our nation's history to evaluate past practices that may have harmed the academic, social, and emotional well-being of students, former students, alumni, families, staff, and the communities we serve.
Noble is devoted to learning from our past and forging a more just future for all that we serve.
In order to continue our path toward becoming an anti-racist organization, we, individually and collectively, commit to
re-examining our past policies and practices that have encouraged assimilation or negatively impacted our students, staff, and communities.
And where appropriate, intentionally changing policies and practices in the interest of equity.
Addressing anti-Blackness at Noble and redressing that harm.
Institutionalizing continual, critical self-reflection that promotes ownership and culturally responsive and sustaining practices at every level of our organization.
Building our individual and collective consciousness about race and racism, and examining our implicit biases and areas of privilege.
Ensuring that all of our community members, including students, families, and staff, have the space to be their authentic selves and ensure their voices are heard.
Approaching all of our work with a lens of intersectionality, taking into account an individual's overlapping identities and experiences.
For example, race, gender identity, sexual orientation, social class, citizenship, etc., in order for the whole person to be valued and affirmed in all spaces at Noble.
Building curricula that welcomes and affirms each student's unique identity and values community cultural wealth.
The order of our commitments is not indicative of importance, chronology, or priority. They must all live constantly and continuously.
So what's next? So actually beginning tomorrow, January 14th, our mid-year staff engagement survey will launch and go live, and it will be open through the end of the month. And as we know at Noble, we always take the time at least twice a year to take a whole step back and reflect and think about how we can refine our practices by providing input and feedback on our leadership here at Noble. That will begin starting tomorrow. What you will see in your staff engagement survey is an additional section. And in that section, we are asking for your input and your feedback around what Noble should prioritize regarding our anti-racist work. We do not get to be anti-racist in a racist way. Even our processes, our methods, our how, they matter. And so we want to hear from every single staff member about what you think we should be prioritizing as we begin this very long journey to dismantle racism at Noble. You will not be starting from a blank sheet of paper. You actually will be looking at the priorities that we named just a year and a half ago. If you recall, our very first DEI steering committee did a listening tour with over 1,000 stakeholders. And you all told us what you thought should be the priorities at Noble. However, the world is very different. It's been very different the last 300 days. It's been different the last 10 days. And so we will be remiss if we didn't ask you, are these priorities still right? And what are we missing? Our normal review cycles that we do every year around our student code of conduct and our Noble identity framework will actually get underway right away. So you should know that. The last thing I think is important to know around what's happening this month is that the equity team will continue these types of conversations around our new commitment to anti-racism with several of our stakeholder groups, including our alumni, our parents, our students, our board, and our community partners. Starting next month, we will begin our true redesigning process, where we will take a look, review all of our policies and practices in an order of scope and sequence, and then get your input and feedback along the way. We really want to hear from stakeholders who will be directly impacted by these different buckets of policies and practices. So for example, we need to hear from families and students about what they believe should be true when it comes to our student code of conduct and dress code. We really do need to hear from our staff when it comes to staff experience, hiring, and our staff handbook. Next, the DEI steering committee is charged with its next project, which is twofold. One, they will craft the outcomes for an anti-racist Noble. And two, they will author a long-term, multi-year plan of priorities and objectives for Noble when it comes to anti-racism. This plan must run through 2024. At the end of the year, we will work to finalize and operationalize our decisions. And because we are doing all of this work, literally in the middle of a pandemic, we will take a pause and really assess what is the current health climate in our country with regards to COVID-19, and where needed, make pivots or changes, because safety is still our number one priority.
So I'll begin by saying that racism didn't begin with the hatred we saw this summer. Its history is centuries old, and thus we will not likely dismantle racism in the course of insert time expectation here. But we are committed to the long haul of the work, and we are well underway. We also have to acknowledge that Noble has done amazing work. We've all witnessed it and been a part of it. Noble has also caused hurt. We've all witnessed it and been a part of that as well. We're all still here and evolving and healing. This requires honesty and each of us claiming ownership while doing the listening and the work it takes to move forward. Anti-racism is daily self-work. Everyone on this Zoom has the potential to do racist things every day, which also means we have the potential to do anti-racist things every day. It requires reflection, practice, and purpose. Our work has people's lives and their livelihoods at stake. We impact current and future generations. Our structures must align to that level of responsibility and have the ability to do this work in a way that acknowledges this highly consequential profession. And speaking of our families and impact, our parents choose Noble both for the education they receive within our walls and the opportunities to further their education in institutions across the nation. Until they say differently, we work to serve by ensuring our children have the option of college by effectively preparing them with skills and access. We see literacy as liberation, we see skill building as success, and we see college as resistance.
All right, you all, we're gonna wrap it up. So what's next? You can see the quote here on the slide. Without reflection, we go blindly on our way, creating more unintended consequences and failing to achieve anything useful. What's next for you is to personalize this work first. Think about how you can truly create your space to become anti-racist. Continue to lean in and do the hard work, and continue to grow your own skills and development. And then every single time you need to, you see the ask from Noble to help us figure out how to get better, we hope that you will lean in and join us in this very, very important work. I'm going to close out by saying thank you again. Thank you to our DEI steering committee. All of these people showed up this evening and held down our rooms while we figured out how to make sure that those affinity spaces still worked. So I want to give a personal shout out to each and every one of them, because I already know they did a great job. They are truly the experts in how to outlive this commitment statement. I want to say a special thank you to our external affairs team, to our community engagement team, to our comms team who all helped us today. Huge shout out to our tech team. I know them. I know they're probably kicking themselves in all kinds of ways today, and they don't need to. And I want to say a special shout out to my partner, not in crime, but in justice fighting and freedom fighting. And that is none other than D. Nigel Green. Thank you all. Have a great night. Enjoy your family. Rest well, because the revolution is waiting for us. Have a good night.